araw ng pakikibaka, ang lakas nasa pagkakaisa.
Our next speaker is Kim Scipes, and Kim is one of the foremost experts on the Afl-Cio's international relations, the role of the NED, and its real political role internationally. So welcome, Kim Scipes.
Thank you, Steve. It's good to be here on this 20th anniversary of the failed Venezuelan coup that took place in 2002. I was one of the first, I believe, the first person to understand that the Afl-Cio was involved in that. The coup took place in April, and by March or by May, I had an article in ZNet claiming that thinking that the Afl-Cio was involved. One of the things that had happened is because, and I'm going to use what James Jordan said earlier about linking Fred Hirsch. Fred and I were very close. Fred exposed the Afl-Cio operations within Chile, and within a year had gotten a resolution passed by the South Bay Central Labor Council. And so Fred and I worked together very closely, and I was studying the Chilean coup. And when the Venezuelan coup took place, then I saw some very, very parallel efforts. And so I started looking, and later I confirmed this in Caracas with a conversation with a senior leader of the CTV, the major labor center in Venezuela. So it's good to be speaking on the 20th anniversary. I got to speak at the 10th anniversary for the consulate of Venezuela in Chicago. So I've got a little bit of history there. Now, also, I have written about this, by the way, and the thing I'm going to talk about today is found in my book. It's a 2010 book. It's called Afl-Cio Secret War Against Developing Country Workers, Solidarity or Sabotage. And it's been out for a while. You should be able to get it on Zoom. But I think everybody who wants to look at what the Afl-Cio has done in their history should get this book. And it's not because I got a terrible contract. I don't get any money out of it. So, so I would encourage people to get this. It's I would argue, the most complete examination of Afl-Cio labor operations. Many people who even know about this stuff, it's not widely known. Many people think it started in the late 40s against the Soviet Union and the communist movement. In reality, the Afl-Cio's foreign policy began in the late 1800s under Samuel Gompers. And I provide that history, and in that I give an overview of what had happened up to about 2007. So if you're interested in looking at what the Afl-Cio has done, I think this book is absolutely essential. I'm very proud of it, and it holds up. But that also leads me to another thing. Prior to exposing the Afl-Cio's role in the Venezuelan coup in 2002. Anyway, prior to that, I'd done a bunch of research in the Philippines. And in the Philippines, the Afl-Cio was working with a labor center called the Trade Union Congress of the Philippines that was created by Ferdinand Marcos. And they were opposing the more radical unions in the KMU labor center. KMU stands for Kilusung Mayo Uno, or May 1st movement. And what I detailed was that an affiliate of the Trade Union Congress of the Philippines, the Marcos side, was working with a death squad in the struggle at Atlas Mines. And these people, I mean, I'm not exaggerating when I say death squad, that there were people there that were in the union working inside the mines, and they were killing other miners. And it's an incredible struggle. And this is documented in my 1998 book, KMU Building Genuine Trade Unionism in the Philippines. Now, this book is on my website at Purdue University Northwest. and it's online for free. So you can read about this in pages 116 to 125 about my account of the struggle at Atlas Mines. So we have the Afl-Cio documented in Chile. We have them documented actually in their first time we had the AFL involved in the coup in Guatemala in 1954. They were involved in the coup in Brazil in 1964. I'm sorry, the coup in Guatemala was 53. The coup in Brazil, which helped overthrow a democratically elected government, was in 1964. We have them involved in the coup in Chile in 1973, overthrowing another democratic elected government. We see them involved in supporting this coup in Venezuela in 2002. So this history is known, and I'm not speculating. I mean, I have extensive details in my book, in my 2010 book, Afl-Cio's Foreign Policy. I have extensive details, and I'm not alone. Obviously, you've heard from other people, but my work is focused primarily on the labor movement. Now, one of the things that I want to do is we've talked about the NED, and there's not been much explanation, National Endowment for Democracy. And I want to take a few minutes to talk about this because this is the crucial link in Afl-Cio foreign policy. And I want to say something, and this is somewhat of a controversial statement, but I think it's overwhelmingly supported, is that the operations of the Afl-Cio, are not being forced on them by the CIA or the White House or the US government in general, the State Department, none of that, not externally, they come internally from within the labor movement. And this is very, very strongly documented. And like I say, it goes back to the late 1800s and continues on, and my book details this. But what we have in the 70s, after the Chilean coup, there was an in-depth examination of CIA operations by a US Senator named Frank Church out of Idaho. And Church really exposed a lot of stuff that they had done. His hearings were pretty amazing. Ronald Reagan gets into power he won the election in 1980. He came into power in 1981, and his people were shocked, just shocked about the revelations that Church made about this. Not that they were shocked about what was done, they were shocked that it was revealed to the American public. We can't have that. So they created an organization called National Endowment for Democracy, or NED. Now, this is important to understand because there's so many lies and myths and disinformation about the NED. Let me put some things out for your consideration. One of the things is that, first of all, the NED was a government creation. It was created by the US government. It was created through the Congress. It was approved by Congress and signed into law by Ronald Reagan in 1983. Now, it's got an interesting position in that it's not directly under control of the government. They set it up as a quasi-governmental thing, but they've made it so only the NED chooses who runs the NED. So even if a president came in and wanted to change the NED, he or she cannot. And that's the way it's set up. So the NED is funded by an annual appropriation, which continues today by Congress, and they are not controlled by the government. They're their own operation. Now, for this to make sense, I think we have to understand something. And I don't think the American left has been very good about this, but we've got to confront this. And that point is that the US has an empire. So in other words, they talk about the US as though we're just a normal country, but in reality, we are an empire and the leading empire in the world. And all of our foreign policy since at least 1945, the end of World War II, has been designed to control the rest of the world. Now, that might sound shocking, but you could make the argument it actually goes to 1898 with the Spanish-American War, the war in the Philippines, the war in Cuba, etc. But at least since 1945, there's no question the US has been trying to dominate the world. Now, it's not to protect the United States. That's the myth. The reality is that the elites, the ruling class, whatever term you want to use, have tried to dominate the world for their interests as they define them, not on the behalf of American people. However, the AFL-CIO's top leadership, now this is not all union members, so let's be clear, I'm talking about the top leadership, they agreed that the US should run the world, and they have worked continuously to make that happen. Now, they have done that behind the backs of AFL-CIO members, union members. They have never given an honest report about their foreign operations. The Solidarity Center, which is their wing, and it's totally controlled by the AFL-CIO. It's not just affiliated, it's controlled by the leadership of the AFL-CIO. They're operating in 60 different countries around the world. We don't know why, we don't know who they're working with. And so I'm supporting things that were said by James and others about what they were doing. The things that David was talking about in South Africa, I learned about firsthand. I had a couple of friends I went to graduate school in the Netherlands with that came out of COSATU and the labor struggles. I myself visited South Africa in 2006 and spoke to many activists and things like this. So David was not exaggerating at all, including the stuff about Buthelezi. And I had a close friend in Durban that was involved in the labor movement in those days he was talking about. This stuff is known around the world. Now, what we've got to, so not only they've been doing these operations. Now, I said they were not controlled by the CIA, but they were operating with and continue to operate with the CIA, not as subservient partners, but as willing co-partners. Okay, now we have to go back and understand the NED. So like I was saying, Frank Church, Senator Frank Church revealed a lot of things that the that the US government was doing in general. Reagan didn't like it being exposed. They set up the National Endowment for Democracy. Now, what you have to understand is that the AFL-CIO there are four major institutes. Let me start again. There are four major institutes that basically comprise the National Endowment for Democracy. One is the international wing of the Democratic Party. One is the international wing of the Republican Party. One is the international wing of the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. And the fourth institute is the Solidarity Center, the international wing of the AFL-CIO. Okay, they are involved throughout the NED. Anytime you hear about the NED, the AFL-CIO is involved, period. Now, they say, well, we have to apply for grants, and they do that. James was talking about that. I think that's important to understand. But the purpose of the NED is, the head of it, Alan Weinstein, stated in 1991, well, we're doing things that legally and above ground that the CIA used to do underground. The NED is set up. Now, first of all, they say their job is to promote democracy around the world. It's a nice slogan. It's a lie. Because there are actually two types of democracy. We've only been told of one. So we're told, and we've been propagandized on this since at least kindergarten in our schooling, and that is a one person, one vote. If you're affected, you get to have a vote, things like this. And that, in technical terms, is called popular democracy or bottom-up democracy. There's another type that we're never told about, and that's the top-down democracy or constrained democracy, or what's called polyarchal democracy. And another term for this is elite democracy, because it allows the elites to make the crucial decisions. And then once they've set the parameters, once they've limited how far you can go, then people get to vote. Then you get to choose candidates. The NED has been going around the world, and they have been promoting this top-down polyarchal democracy and portraying it, however, as popular democracy. In other words, this top-down democracy is being promoted as though it was the democracy we've all been taught. It's a lie from A to Z. These bastards are illegal, immoral. They're war criminals. I think there's no other way to put it. And the guy running it for most of the year was a guy named Carl Gershman, who had worked with Jean Kirkpatrick at the State Department. She was this idiot that Ronald Reagan promoted, that supported authoritarian governments around the world, things such as this. They've got a terrible record. Carl Gershman had been the research director at the Afl-Cio. So the Afl-Cio has been complicit. The top levels have been complicit ever since, like I say, in reality, going back to the late 1890s, but they have been complicit with the NED ever since it was founded in 1983. But they were also complicit, and this I kind of skipped over this by mistake, so I want to go back. But in the 60s, they created these international institutes. The one we know most about is AFL, the American Institute for Free Labor Development, which operated in Latin America. And if you haven't seen Rob McKenzie's new book, El Golpe, the coup at Ford, the labor movement, the CIA, and the coup at Ford in Mexico, which just came out in February, I highly, highly recommend it. It's by Pluto Books. Rob did a marvelous job in detailing what had happened in Mexico, and I highly recommend the book. But that was a field. And we also had parallel organizations in Africa, the African American Labor Center, AALC, and we also had that in Asia, the Asian American Free Labor Institute, or AFLI. Now, AFLI was the one that had channeled the money from the U.S. government to the Trade Union Congress of the Philippines, which was supporting the dictator Ferdinand Marcos. And I know about this firsthand because I was in the Philippines in January and very, very early February 1996, right before, or 1986, excuse me, just before Marcos left, was thrown out of the country. He left 20 days after I left. I don't know if there's a connection or whatever, but I was there. The point I'm trying to point out is that the U.S. The U.S. government has done all this stuff, and certainly Covert Action magazine, which if you're not a reader of, you should be. I highly recommend it, and I commend Lou Wolf and his colleagues on that journal. But we've seen the U.S. operate around the world. But what most people don't know is that the Afl-Cio's top leadership has been collaborating with them ever since. And we're not speculating. We know this information. There's growing amounts of information. In fact, I brought out an article in an online journal called Class, Race, and Corporate Power. It's a peer-reviewed journal out of the Political Science Department of Florida International University. My article came out in October 2020, if I remember right, detailing what we know about the Afl-Cio's foreign operations. This stuff is out there. If you don't know about it, it's because you haven't looked or you haven't paid attention. We know this information. We know they're collaborating with the NED. We know the Solidarity Center is operating around the world. Like I say, they're operating in something like 60 countries, and nobody knows which ones or what. Strangely enough, it seems like they're operating in oil-producing countries. It also looks like they're operating in Eastern Europe, in the former Soviet states. They're operating in Ukraine, and they were, I believe, I can't prove it yet, but I have no doubt that they were involved in the 2014 coup at Maidan in Ukraine that overthrew the democratically elected government that was there, that led to the present series of governments. There was a fire in Odessa in southern Ukraine where something like 100 people were burned in the trade union building of the city. And I never could find even a statement of sorrow or of disappointment or objection or anything by the AFL-CIO. I don't know when we'll find out this information. Unfortunately, I don't speak Ukrainian, and we haven't found anybody that has delved into that. But I'm quite confident they were there. They're supporting the U.S. government now, and I'm saying they're not doing this to help our country. They don't really care about our country. They want to maintain the U.S. empire. And I think this is something that we on the left, and we especially in the trade union movement, need to deal with. And the late Fred Hirsch, who was a plumber out of Plumbers and Pipe Fitters 393 in San Jose, California, led the way by exposing this in Chile, the Chilean coup operation he exposed the 1993 or 1973 operation as early as 1974. And like I say, I've worked with Fred. We were longtime friends, building on his legacy. I hope working people will join with us and build on the legacy so far to take it on. And I want to speak for a minute, by the way, the 2005 AFL-CIO convention in Chicago. Somebody mentioned about this, and I'll just take a minute and I'll finish up. But I want to end on this note. In 2004, Fred Hirsch and a number of activists in California had done such marvelous work on the AFL, on countering the AFL-CIO operations, that they went to the state labor convention and won the unanimous vote of over 400 delegates representing 2.6 million workers. California was 1/6 of the entire AFL-CIO, and they voted to condemn the foreign policy of the AFL-CIO. That resolution, called Build Trust and Unity with Workers Worldwide, was forwarded to the AFL-CIO as was required by the organizational constitution, and it went to the resolutions committee. This resolutions committee was headed by Gerald McEntee of AFSCME, the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees. And McEntee changed the resolution from one condemning the AFL-CIO foreign policy to one supporting that. So that went to the supporting the Solidarity Center and their work, went to the convention. People were allowed to speak for it. When our side, the opponents, got up to speak, they were prevented from hearing it, and that the AFL-CIO leadership put it down, would not even allow a discussion, much less a vote on this issue. They've got long time priors for these operations. We've got this established. We're not speculating. So the things that other people and myself are saying today, I think can be, I have no doubt are detailed, they're documented, they can be confirmed. And I think that American workers, and particularly those of us in the AFL-CIO unions, that we need to stop this crap. We need to say an end to any working with the U.S. government. We do not want a U.S. empire. We do not want to try to dominate the world. We want to work with workers and their organizations around the world to build a better world, a peaceful world, and one that challenges not only capitalism, but even more industrial civilization, and to build a world that we can all live on and not being consumed by climate change and the global problem. Thank you very much.